Hello, test, test, test. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yes, we are the Palestinian Conflict Transformation Center. I give you just to you can keep it another. You can give it to anyone else. Okay.
Yep. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you are here this evening with us as we are here at Bon Air Presbyterian Church. My name's Alex Krieger. I'm one of the pastors here, and it's really a privilege to have with us this evening Zogby, who is as the founder and director of WEAM, the Palestinian Conflict Transformation Center. All week long, Zogby's been speaking, I don't know how many different places, just in Richmond, about a dozen or so. Spoke at the seminary earlier today, has spoken at many churches, and is here to share with us about modern day Bethlehem and everything happening right now with modern day Palestine, and also the peace work he's done and the challenges to face. We are just incredibly grateful to have him with us. I've gotten to spent a little bit of time with him Monday for lunch, and just a spirit of great generosity, of care, of peace, and I know you will enjoy hearing from him this evening. So I know he's got a lot to share, and I know you all have probably lots of questions. So at this time, I want to invite Zogby forward with us, and can we give a round of applause as he comes forward?
It is a great privilege to be with you today. And it is wonderful to see such a good crowd to come to listen to a Palestinian living in the occupied territories. It is uplifting to see that at the time when we feel that we are left alone. Still, there are some people who are concerned, some people who are thinking of the people who are oppressed and who are concerned about the issue of peace. And when we talk about the issue of peace, we are not talking about the absence of war. We are talking about the presence of justice, presence of human rights. And when we talk about justice, we talk about economic justice, environmental justice, political justice, to be free from all kinds of oppression. I came from Bethlehem, the little town of Bethlehem. And many people are not aware what is Bethlehem. Where is it? Sometimes I come here and they say, Bethlehem, Israel. I say, no, sorry. Bethlehem, Palestine, next to Israel. To be accommodationist and not rejectionist, Bethlehem. Oh, since when they know, are you Christian or Muslim? I say it depends on the day. Sometimes Muslim, sometimes Christian, at night Jewish. And they know that I am a Christian, and then they ask, since when you are becoming a Christian? And my kids told me, please tell them that my great-great-great-grandmother was the babysitter of Jesus. When I say that I am a Christian, yes, I couldn't live my faith without the context of being Palestinian. I am side by side with Muslim friends and brothers and sisters to work for justice and peace, without forgetting Jewish friends, Jewish brothers and sisters who struggle also for justice and peace. Because what is happening there is a deadlock. And of course, pogrom in Gaza, sorry, I used the word pogrom, genocide, to use the word. And there is a slow genocide in West Bank. And nowadays there is another war on the Lebanese front. So the situation of Palestinians are a nowhere situation. No-win situation at all. Whatever we decide to do, we are blamed. It is confusing. It is confusing. It is sophisticated. The whole world who are not aware of the Palestinian plight, they say October 7, the beginning. But in fact, 1948, which started or even before. And the whole world needs to learn that, to look at history and to see the root causes for the conflict. There were always Jewish presence in the historic land of Palestine. And there were Jewish presence in every capital in the Arab world. There is Jewish neighborhood in Baghdad. There was in Baghdad, in Lebanon, Syria, Egypt. And of course, in Palestine, before 1948, there were 6% of the population are Jewish. 6% of the entire population were Jews. The role of UK at that time as a colonial power, divide and conquer, encouragement of immigration of Jews to the land of Palestine, and some religious folks who were at that time in the minority in the world believe in the promised land and the Jews are chosen people. And the whole Zionist identity is based that Jews are people without land, and Palestine is land without people. And during the British mandate played a role encouraging Jewish population to increase, to come and live in the areas, while preventing the Palestinians who have been living, for example, in Latin America to come back. And there was a double standard. And it seems we are not getting rid of the double standard even now by the power to be. So there were a lot of violence here and there, and the UN decided to divide Palestine into two states. Jewish state, where's the white? Israel. And the green is Arab state. The Jewish state were given 52% of the land. The Arab state, not the Palestinian state, they call it Arab state, 45%. And, like this Jerusalem, Nazareth up in Galilee, and Bethlehem considers corpus separatum. But of course, everyone claims a narrative different than the other in the war of 1948. But without going and indulging who started it, the Israeli controlled over 77.7% of the land of historic Palestine, leaving, the rest divided between West Bank and Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip and West Bank is here. West Bank became part of Jordan because from 48 to 67, the Hashemite kingdom is in control. Then Gaza Strip became part of Egypt. But since 1967, when Israel occupied the remnant of historic Palestine, Israel embarked on settlement building all over. And it continues up till this moment. Between 800,000 to 1 million Israeli Jewish illegal settler in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Again, the numbers could be different from one source to another. Could be some resources talk about 500,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank because they consider Jerusalem as a unified eternal capital of Israel, East Jerusalem. But anyhow, the situation since then continues to be terrible. But the whole world again the Palestinians, of course, did something terrible on October 7. It was not healthy, it's terrible, killing more people, but it's not the beginning of our plight. And nowadays, it is much more dangerous. It is much more dangerous to see 2.5 million Palestinians who live in Gaza, who used to live in Gaza, which is 141 square miles, are devastated. 80% of the buildings are destroyed, hospitals are destroyed, schools were destroyed, 15,000 children at schools were killed, 500 schools are destroyed, no fresh water, nothing at all healthy there. There like polio, cholera, and different sicknesses there. And on the top of that, right-wing ministers who are aligned with Netanyahu in forming the government, they say it is ethical to make these Palestinians have famine. Again, the world is silent. Gaza is not really the main issue. The Israeli government would like the West Bank because the right-wing extremist Jews with the right-wing evangelical Christians, they believe if They take the West Bank, which is called in their literature and their political documents, Judea and Samaria. Judea and Samaria. And they think the right-wing Christians in this country, or whatever term you would like to use, this will speed up the second coming of the Messiah. I have no problem that the Messiah will come again, but please don't let it on my expense as a Palestinian. When I talk about these things, I'm not against Jews. I am against the occupation. In the long run, this piece of land, Garden State is smaller than that, New Jersey, is a place for Jews, Muslims, Christians, Druze, Baha'i, Samaritans, and everyone. And we should really enjoy celebrating life together, not really to see blood. Let us smell roses rather to see the blood. So the campaign on the West Bank started a few weeks ago, few months ago, and started from the north with the refugee camps. And they want to liquidate the Palestinian cause by finishing the refugee camps. And it will continue, I'm afraid, unless we have some countries to have a ceasefire. I can go along these lines and continue to talk about a human rights violation. But what is needed now, before anything, we need immediate ceasefire. And the ceasefire not to be just for a while. We want it to be everlasting ceasefire that will lead to jumpstart the peace process, to lead the people in whoever left in Gaza to live in peace and security, and to start thinking of another way to help the refugees to settle. Gaza itself is the place of refugees from 1948. 70% of the population are refugees. And I don't know what to do and how to say it. Some Israeli friends, still we have some friends from the other side, to call and ask, how are you, how are things? And we tell them about the situation. And I ask a simple question. I say at least 500 family members from 500 extended families killed all. What would you think if one or two survived and meet the Israelis? Do you think they will hug them, kiss them? This is not a recipe for coexistence. In the long run, it is a recipe for taking revenge, for hate. It is a recipe for more destruction. Yes, Israel is now superpower in the Middle East, but no injustice will last forever. No government will continue to control other nations forever. Could be 1 year, could be 10 years, could be 20, could be 30 years. At the end, no one can control anyone forever. I like what someone defines the conflict as clashes of narratives. And we see there is no one single narrative on Israel and single narrative on Palestine. There are many narratives. And it seems now what is controlled the narratives on Israel is the more extreme folks who would like to ethnically cleansing the Palestinians from that area, who believe in kicking all of us, not only from Gaza, but from the West Bank, and of course East Jerusalem is another story, and as well as to embark on a war, and it is very terrible war on Lebanon. So, what is the solution? How can we move from this deadlock? I believe, if we want to see more justice and peace, and to see the dialogue of arms replaced by arms of dialogue, once and for all, we need to continue to have three dimensions of the struggle. The Palestinians to have proactive, non-violent struggle to get rid of the occupation. And I say non-violent struggle because Netanyahu and his group would like to see Palestinians to be more militant in the West Bank to justify the ethnic cleansing. We want to deprive the Israeli government from an enemy, and many times we feel they don't need the justification. They do it. And some Palestinians will say, if Martin Luther King was our prime minister, Gandhi is our president, Mother Teresa the social minister, and so on, Israel is not interested in recognizing the Palestinians. The best Palestinian is that Palestinian. Anyhow, this is the first dimension. I believe we need to continue the struggle in an unarmed way. Second, the pro-peace camp in Israel, the pro-justice, some small groups here and there, should continue their preventive approach of nonviolence to get rid of being the occupier. Some might say they are a small SAS, but they are a ray of hope. We need, in 1982, when Prime Minister or Defense Minister Sharon at that time occupied Beirut, Lebanon, there were 500,000 Israelis on the roads protesting against Sharon. Nowadays, very few here and there. There is a big protest in Tel Aviv and other places against the government, Israeli government, as well as to release the prisoners, the hostages. Not necessarily all of them are looking for coexistence, but they are needed more and more. And it is better for the Israeli society to see such movements. And many of the Western right-wing groups, Christian groups and others, they say, but we need to save the soul of Israel. And will say bluntly, if we want to save the soul of Israel, help Israel to get rid of the occupied territories, to leave us alone. The third dimension of the struggle is needed, is to see people like you, the student movement, the faith groups, the young of the heart and young of the age, to empower the weak, but to bring the strong to their senses. I'm not interested to bring the strong to their knees. That's why the second thing is to work for restorative justice, to redress the wrongs rather than avenging it. And we see that restorative justice, and the third point, the transformation, happened in South Africa. How Nelson Mandela, Bishop Tutu, and the ANC was able to, free themselves from the apartheid. And they didn't have revenge. At that time, let us be reminded that the world have been in support of the ANC and the freedom movement. Although the Africano government was trying to have what we call Inkatha, divide and conquer. But they didn't win the thing. So we need to learn from the South African struggle as Palestinians and as Israelis, as human beings. So we need restorative justice, and to bring those to justice also through the International Court of Justice, who carried out massacres, who carried out terrible things against civilians. The third point, which is very important, to see transformation. And again, we could say all of these are really more dreams, but we should be dreaming, because we are dealing with the human lives. We are not dealing with borders and terrible things. We need to save the lives of people, you know. And you saw what in Northern Ireland, how the Republicans and the Loyalists were able to find a way to deal with it through George Mitchell as an arbitrator. We need nowadays the quartet to repeat its mission and to move to bring again dialogue and move forward to create momentum for a new era. It is not easy when you have power. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. A lack of power also corrupts. But we cannot go on this road, continue. And we don't want to go on this road that it will lead us to more massacres, to more bloodshed. Some people say, you know, the Palestinians have the right to armed struggle. The Palestinians have the right to struggle by all means. And the Palestinians need to do this or that. And some others says, let the Palestinians surrender. And this is the end of the conflict for them. I feel it is the era of national rights. No way to demise the ambitions of the local people who has been struggling for a long time, more than 100 years, to be independent, to live in a dignity and secure borders. We need to see that momentum again for coexistence, be like a snowball, gaining more momentum and quantum. Yes, we cannot really think that revenge will be the answer. We don't think Netanyahu could continue to liquidate us. We are 14 million people, 7 billion living in the Holy Land, and other 7 million in diaspora. Yes, Netanyahu could finish many Palestinians, you know, and kill more people. Already we have in Gaza 41,000 Palestinians and more killed. Almost 100,000 were wounded, and more people under the rubble. So, you know, and the world still silent. When will the world be awakened? And if the Palestinians have chosen other way, they will say, yes, the Palestinians are wrong. And we tried all of our best to negotiate. We hit the ground. And I think the only solution at this moment is the United States to have a pressure on Israel. And instead, President Biden gave Israel more than $40 billion in the last, in terms of arms and money, you know. And of course, Israel is selling arms to the world by saying it is tested. This is not a recipe again for peace. The United States people, you know, should really think differently about this situation. We don't want their tax money to enslave us. I have no problem if there were support for Jews based on human rights, based on, different ways to invest in schools and education and hospital. But to see these weapons to kill us, it is not healthy. And also, $3.7 billion each year goes from United States to Israel without any accountability. So again, I think, and I know we are asking the impossible at this moment. There are elections here. There is election. And we know, there is a competition. And I hope the people in the United States will vote responsibly and without bloodshed also. But at the same time, we need not to be enslaved by the tax money. So I think, what can I bring news to this group? How we enhance hope. Hope for me is a form of struggle. I cannot live without hope. And hope to see in the student movement, in the faith-based movement, in the Jewish Voices for Peace, and the Arab voices who are against the occupation, who are working, although I am not happy with the 57 Arab and Muslim states who are not able to bring a cup of water to Israel, to Gaza. So I think our cause has been much more international than being local, and I think it is the time that the international community will find a way to deal with Israel and to have the UN have teeth to impose a solution, there, and to say what is happening is not healthy. And let us go for international conference to be based on justice, and let all the violence be stopped. This is just thing to think now, but I like to open the floor for questions and to have a dialogue rather than me talk and have a monologue.
Hopefully, yeah. If you have a question, raise a hand, and I'll come and grab and hand you the microphone.
This is a bit of a two-parter because you had said, well, I'll stand just so others can, yeah. Is it better like this? Okay. You had asked when the world is going to wake up, and I, for one, as maybe some of the others here feel, the world has woken up about this, but there's one country that hasn't. The United Nations is almost unanimous, accepting one country very close to where we are. And so that's a discouraging thought, because I think everybody else is afraid to do anything unless we do. And I've almost forgotten the second question. Oh yeah, I remember now. So the issue of Netanyahu. So I'm in academia, and I have very many colleagues in Israel who almost uniformly are against Netanyahu and everything that he's doing. What's your sense of what is possible in Israel with any time in the near future where he might be removed, outvoted, whatever? Is there any sort of movement there that you see is possible in the near future?
Thank you. Yes, when we started the peace process, and we talk about Oslo, although Oslo is not very having good name among the Palestinians, there were the quartet, Russia, US, EU, and UN to support this process. We know that the UN is teethless. toothless. It's weak. EU is involved now in Ukraine. The NATO is there. And all the Europeans have now supporting Ukraine against Russia. It is another story. But Russia is involved heavily with occupying, liberating, whatever the term you want to use, Ukraine. So United States is the only country that could have leverage. And it could have leverage by stopping the aids to Israel, the military aid. You know, why up till this moment there are support of weapons? Why, why all of this money goes to Israel? So the only way that Israel will come to terms with others about thinking of solving the conflict is through having, stopping the aid, and the Israeli Jews to stop Netanyahu's power, although now he has at least 62 members of Knesset, and more right-wing. The middle class, many of them left the country, and so it is not easy. Jewish Voices for Peace, with other allies here and there, really could influence the power of Netanyahu and impact it by having more coalitions in this country, exerting pressure on the American foreign policy, and also the Arab states who are not doing anything, Arab people, to go to the streets, to demonstrate, and to refuse any normalization before Israeli withdrawal from the occupied territories. It is a collective responsibility. We need this collective responsibility to be at work. But it seems nowadays Netanyahu would like to be the king of Israel and continue to be the king until he finishes what he says he wants to clean the area from anyone who is threatening Israel. Whether he will be able to impose his solutions, or hopefully that he will not continue to be the king of Israel, and Israeli Jews will be liberated from his tyranny.
Yeah. I think we have another question.
Yes, I'm afraid that Netanyahu has stirred up a hornet's nest by going by going into Lebanon. And I wonder what your thoughts are on his expansion of military force.
Netanyahu is clear in his approach, using the justification of Hezbollah. He wants the Litani River water, and he wants to push Hezbollah to the north of the Litani River. And the problem is, it is easy to start a war, but it's not easy to end the war. And I'm afraid this war will lead to a regional war. Although Iran is not interested to continue to support the axis, if you would like to say, axis of resistance all the time. But I am afraid that Netanyahu is an iconist suicidal, and if there is insurgent war, if there is street war in Lebanon, it will bring more havoc to the Israeli. Nowadays, more than 500, 600 people killed in Lebanon. Most of the Lebanese on the southern villages were running away, and he always sent messages, it is better for you to leave your homes rather than, again, I don't know, this is the first time I see someone is creating more enemies. You know, from a strategic point of view, if you want to conquer the other, you need not to bring the Palestinians in Gaza your enemy, the West Bank, Jerusalem, the Galilee, to have, the Lebanese more, the Yemeni, the Iraqis. And I tell you, you don't know what will happen tomorrow with these masses in Egypt and Jordan. Will they revolt? Will they, come to the borders? It is risky to continue with this war. I hope, again, the only one who will change Netanyahu is the Israeli people and the Jewish people in the world, because it is good to tell Netanyahu not in my name, because he will endanger not only Israeli Jews in the occupied territories, but also the world Jewish population. If, the world will not be silent. Yes, now it's silent, it's like drugged, but in the long run, it will not help any cause of any nation.
Yeah. Linda, do you want to read the question?
This is from Susan Wilder, who's the co-moderator of the Israeli-Palestine Mission Network of the Presbyterian Church USA. She says, "Thank you for your excellent presentation. We were pleased to meet with you and your wife at YM on our May delegation. Can you please talk about the work of YM?"
Yes, thank you. Yes, instead of cursing darkness that we are not able to deal with, we light humble candles. But before that, Susan Wilder knows my wife. My wife is American from Hoosier State. Don't take it against me. We have been married for the last 34 years, but my wife is not allowed to live with me in the West Bank. She's on tourist visa every 3 months, renewable to some years. If at the beginning of our marriage, now she is not allowed to travel through Tel Aviv airport, except through Jordan, and she needs to have the approval of COGAT, the coordinating office of the Israeli governmental activities in the territories. She is now in the States, not allowed to be in the West Bank. And of course, we don't know, she applies for that to come back. It takes 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, we don't know. So anyhow, my wife loves me a lot to continue to work in WIAM while she is not here. I can work on Kairos time and not Chronos time. So what I do in WIAM, one of the basic things of WIAM is mediation on the local level. It is a good season for conflict. Never be a dull moment. We have lots of conflicts to deal with, from domestic violence as a result of living in a pressure cooker situation, to conflicts between neighbors, between everything. We don't think that the Palestinians love to have conflict, but as a result of the long simmering frustration over the occupation and the unhealthy conditions that we live, so we mediate and we offer psychosocial support for our people around the clock, and we try to help them to get rid or to have trauma coping and not trauma healing. Trauma coping because we don't have the post-traumatic stress disorder. It is an ongoing trauma, layer after layer, current trauma. So we try to help the people find safe environment to ventilate their stress, to air out their situation, and to work at least together to create a better atmosphere. No one should stop us, or we don't want to allow anyone to interfere in our own order at home. But the situation is not like that, so that's why we are active on the ground. Other issues, we work with women. 70% of the women 70% of Gaza victims are women and children. So we work with women to empower them, to work on gender justice, gender mainstreaming, and under the umbrella of UN Security Council 1325, which talks about women, security, and peace. We have works with them, try to empower them economically, try to provide psychosocial support, try to be with them to fight against domestic violence. And we work with women in different places in the West Bank. Nowadays, we cannot go as we used to go to the north and the south, and we used to work with people in Gaza. And we tried also to have CEDAW to be implemented, agreed by the Palestinian Authority, which is the Convention on Elimination of All Discrimination Against Women. We try to work in that sense, to have coalition of many development organizations, to work with other women organizations to alleviate the suffering of our people in general, but also the suffering of women. We also work with children, again, in trauma coping, not trauma healing, and you see the children suffer from involuntary urination, nightmares, sleepwalk, sleeping disorder, eating disorder, and we work with them to help them again ventilate through theater of the oppressed, through summer camps, through peer mediation, and through anti-bullying programs in school and out schools. And of course, we work with youth. 1/3 of the youth population have been in prison before October 7. Now the percentage is higher. Many people are killed, many people are in prison. So we work with the youth. We want them to be assertive and not aggressive. We want them to breathe freedom. We want to let them live like others. The things that you have for granted in the US, our people die from it. There's a theft of spontaneity. Our youth couldn't grab the passport and want to leave, to visit or to study abroad. It is pain in the neck to have a permit to go to Jerusalem for continuing your education in other countries and to have a visa. So some might say, why you are spread like that? Women, children, youth, and women and men, and because we are a community-based society, and the family is a viable socio-economic unit. And of course, we are active in advocacy. Advocacy is very important. We need to work together again, and we hope that the World Coalition will be strong and strengthened to really address the needs of the local community there and to move forward. So in our free time, we go to our families, if there is, but we work on Kairos time and not Chronos time.
I have a question for you, and then I'll get to some of the others. Is with right now, what we've just seen in the last 10 months, horrific genocide, loss of life, trauma, that's, if there was a ceasefire today, the trauma would be generations continuing on. How in the world do you continue to invite people to seek peace? That seems so hard with, if we were in the middle of it. It's easy for us here to kind of say peace is for Palestinians, for Israelis, but for those who have lost dozens of family members, to those who have lost homes, to those who've been gone to school for a year, those who can't walk freely in parks, how does that, just even vision of peace, how is that even going to be continued on?
Thank you. I was in a group called Compassionate Listening, and I met there with a woman whose great-great-grandparents were in the Holocaust. and we were discussing about trauma. And she said it takes 7 generations to heal from trauma. Imagine if we end tomorrow the occupation, it takes 7 generations. It means 150 years at least after that. It's not an easy situation to have rehabilitation, to heal from the wounds. And it is a long struggle. It is a struggle that needs a lot. But also, we are part of the global family, whether we like it or not. We shouldn't have the monopoly over pain or the monopoly over victimhood. You know, other people, other nations, look at the African, people in South Africa were able to move forward. We see the civil rights movement here. Yes, still there are racism, there are different things in certain circles. So I think when we are hoping to heal, it takes a lot of energy, a lot of resources, a lot of training, and but I'm not optimistic. If I'm optimistic, I'll lure you. I am never pessimistic. I will commit suicide, but I am cautiously hopeful, and cautiously hopeful that work things together. And I was here on a STAR program with the Eastern Mennonite University. STAR program means Seminar on Trauma Awareness and Recovery after September 11. I don't know why I was there. They want probably to expose to the Americans there are Palestinians, there are other nations who are suffering. Yes, September 11, we are against what happened, but wait a minute. There are people who has long time of suffering. So there's always education and mutual learning, and there is a process that needs to heal. It is not easy. It is not 10-minute oil change. It takes a lot of education. It takes a lot of remedy. Lots of counseling, and of course, you need to have the resources also and the cadres to be able to heal. Again, I cannot tell you about the future, but we try to struggle for more just situation at this moment. But we need, before we think of these long-term goals, a ceasefire now. A ceasefire now, and then all the things there will be open for us to think and work and move forward.
Yeah, thank you so much for the talk. I guess I want to ask a couple of questions. One is, and I think you've partly answered this already, your position on BDS and are doing all we can to stop the arming of Israel. So your position on those two things. Again, I think you've already partly answered that. But I also want to say a little bit about the tendency to focus on Netanyahu's government. Because I have to say, it's not so clear to me that that's the sole problem here. And I think in many respects your maps demonstrate this, that the problem has more to do with the Zionist project going back 100 years, and that this map demonstrates that the problem is not simply this or that Israeli government, but that project. And one might even say the very state of Israel itself as a Zionist project. You've probably all seen in recent days, Netanyahu has shown maps that totally erase the West Bank. They don't even show the West Bank. And there are members of his cabinet that now draw the picture of Israel as extending into Syria and
From
Jordan,
the Nile to Euphrates.
Iraq. And that's the map actually that Zionists had in their pockets when they planned the colonization of this part of the world. So again, I want to open that up as something to consider, and I think that speaks to the question of, to me it seems like two-state is done, and the map demonstrates that, and so what's the vision going forward?
Yes, there was a map about Greater Israel, from the Nile to Euphrates. And they believe, the leaders of the Zionist movement, that it will take slowly these places. And many times we have a joke that Israel is a peace-loving country. And they say, how? Say, it occupies land piece by piece. But at the same time, I mean, it is the time really that we need to feel that we are as human beings, to look for hope, to look for ways that to alleviate the suffering here and there. I think gone the time of wishful thinking. I believe Israel would like to have a greater Israel, no more West Bank. Smotrich and Beni Ghafir, and there are other settlements built soon nowadays. Yes, I don't know how can we phrase our national struggle in nowadays. If we say we want one state solution, many Israelis say you are against our presence, you don't want to recognize us. And if we say two-state solution, no West Bank and Gaza left. We are in no win situation. Some people say we need to have more BDS. I think, I leave it to everyone's mind and what is more comfortable to do. BDS or morally investment in the West Bank, in the Palestinian areas. Because I know some people might be held responsible and punished if they call for BDS. And I know others will be punished if they think to invest in the West Bank or with the Palestinians. And nowadays there is no way to invest. It is, again, no-win situation, and it is catch-22 as I begin with it. Again, hopefully the world will be changed, and only the world will be changed through the power of the people on the grassroots level. Yes, nowadays more states and more people are going to the right wing. What does it mean to liberate it from these traditional views and backward views and awkward views? How can we liberate ourselves to move in the less traveled road, where to be more inclusive, where to be reciprocal? So this is a challenge for each one of us in different countries. And I don't want to sound naive by saying that, but I feel it is a long, long, long struggle.
Okay, I think we have 3 more questions then, and that'll probably be it for. So we've got you, and one online. And since I'm over here, I'm going to start with the one online. And
This is from Kathy in Springfield, Virginia. Could you please talk about the economic situation in the West Bank and what people are struggling with in terms of trying to find work and feed their families?
I don't know. I wish that we have economy now. It is devastated economy. The GNP per capita is less than it was, less than $2,000. In Israel, over $40,000. The Palestinian unemployment in certain places reached 75%. I give you an example of Bethlehem, which depends on tourism and pilgrims, no jobs at all. Started with the COVID, and now with what has happened. 70% of the West Bank land is under Israeli control. So the agricultural, products or to invest in agriculture is also weak. Let alone 90% of the water in the West Bank is taken by Israel, while we don't have water for drinking or even to have our tanks filled with. There is green lawns and settlements, and there are swimming pools. We are not allowed to dig aquifers in the West Bank, until Israel gave us the agreement. In the past, there were remittances from our people who live in diaspora. Now it is very difficult, these remittances, to reach their families. We used to have work in Jerusalem, and many Israelis working in Israel used to bring some cash to their home. So in a way or another, our economy depending on Israel, and Israel is dealing with us as cheap labor. If, this is before October 7 and now more, captive market, and garbage dump. So I don't know if there will be any economy under the occupation. And on top of that, we have now capital flight and many intelligence flight and youth flight.
Yes, I want to apologize for the genocide with our money and the ignorance of the government about Palestinian history. My question is about the United Nations. They recently, I think the Palestinians brought a vote on a resolution to call for a ceasefire and an end to the occupation, based on the violation of international law. And I don't know when that vote is going to occur. And I'm wondering how will the world vote? They don't always. I wonder if it would even have a chance of passing. You know what I'm talking about, a recent resolution introduced by the Palestinians in the United Nations?
Yes.
Okay, that's my question.
Your question is, I didn't hear all of it, but there is a movement, of course, to have the world recognize our permanent presence at the UN and to give us a status in the UN. Yeah. It is, I don't know exactly, maybe someone will help us, but at the same time, they, it has been an increasing support to have a Palestinian state and to stop the violence as well as to move forward. But I think Uncle Sam would always veto it.
Just one little tiny spot of hope is my friends, the Nassar family in Bethlehem, whose their motto is, "We refuse to be enemies." George might be here with us now, I'm not sure, I haven't seen him. But at the Tent of Nations, some of you have heard of it, some of you have been there, and inshallah, I may be there in a couple of weeks. But that kind of hope that continues with a family that just refuses to stop
and refuses to have enemies. The other thing, Dar Kalima School and University, the university started by Pastor Mitri Raheb is for the arts and expressive things for exactly the reasons that you said, in order to give people some expression, in order to be able to create some hope on their own so that they can see that life really is worth living. I know they had a little problem there last week with some broken glass and some soldiers and whatnot, but they keep trying. And when asked, do you ever get angry to Pastor Raheb? His answer was, well, yes. And they said, well, what do you do? He said, I start another project. And so there are some positive, but they are such small things because the politics don't help make it better. But thank you for being with us and helping so many.
You know, you talk about tent of nations, and I see George there. Yeah, I know him, and I was a witness against Israeli settlers from the beginning there. I also be involved there and bring groups there. And I believe there are many positive signs among the Palestinian people, which is a sign of resilience, a sign of steadfastness. And you named some of them. And I believe every family is struggling, and the Tent of Nations stand tall in their resistance against the settlement movement.
Can I do one more positive? So I just want to give a background.
We have people on.
I just want to give a big shout out to young people and to the younger generation
Yes,
between
of course.
12 and whatever. I mean, all over the world, I'm sure you've all seen videos of young people all over the world, literally, saying we have to have justice for all persons. And it's a beautiful thing to hear, and at least for me, it's been unbelievably inspirational. So just, again, a hopeful note that the younger generation, I think, is on board with global citizenship and making sure everybody can live a good life, and that's a wonderful thing.
Yes. Many salutations for the student movement here.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight. I've had the pleasure of serving on the committee that planned Zogby's visit. He arrived in Richmond Saturday evening, and tonight is the last of his presentations before he moves on to Florida, hurricane, tomorrow. He has had very little downtime since Saturday night, and yet he still is giving us his very best. Thank you for coming and being part of the ones who now have a face put on the crisis. And I hope you will carry this with you and talk to folks. I hope you will call your representatives daily.
And another positive sign before we leave, look at time, people are here, and we are talking and discussing and thinking of ways to empower the local Palestinians in the struggle. Thank you for all of what you are doing.
I want to ask Zogby if he would close us in prayer tonight. Would you please do that for us?
Many times our people say it seems God doesn't speak Arabic, so let us pray in English so he can listen us. Yes, gracious God, we thank you for this gathering. Thank you for such a beloved community who have compassion, who have empathy, and we ask you, God, that one day you will see together the Palestinians to be free, and all the suffering of the people on all corners of the world to be emancipated from slavery, from oppression, from racism, from apartheid. Thank you, Lord, for all the givings, for the gifts, for all the powerful people we have here, the youth of the heart and youth of the age to create a different scenario and sympathy to lead us to liberation. In Jesus' name, or in God's name, we ask you for that. Amen.